In the winter of 1968, 11-year-old Samuel Holt vanished from the town of White Pines, Michigan. His bike was found by the lake. His footprint stopped at the water's edge. No body, no witnesses, just the cold wind and silence. 57 years later, Samuel Holt's diary surfaces, and the last pages tell a story no one was meant to read. This is the lost pages. Before we open the diary, hit subscribe. The house at 412 Lakeside Drive was coming down after 60 years of decay. March 3rd, 2025. Cold, colorless light. Dust turning in the air like ash. Demolition foreman Travis Roan kicked through the rotted paneling of the basement wall, trying to dislodge a stubborn beam. His hammer hit metal instead of wood. Thunk. "Hold up," he called. The crew gathered. Travis knelt, scraping plaster away until a tin lunchbox emerged, dented and streaked with rust. Someone had wrapped it in oilcloth and nailed it into the cavity between studs. Probably some kid's treasure, one worker said. Travis pried it open. Inside lay a stack of lined paper, edges browned, each page filled with dense handwriting in pencil. On the first sheet, a name in careful cursive, Samuel Holt. My diary. A hush settled over the basement. The air felt heavier, the kind of silence that presses on the chest. Travis carried the box upstairs and set it on a crate by the window. The lake shimmered beyond the trees, still half frozen. He flipped to the last entry, dated December 14th, 1968, the day Samuel disappeared. Only 2 words were legible beneath the smudge of pencil and moisture. He knows. By the time forensic archivist Dr. Mara Ellison received the call, the diary had already made local news. She watched the brief clip from her desk at Western Michigan University. A foreman holding up a metal box, camera crews crowding around. The anchor's voiceover said, "Experts are working to authenticate the diary." The Holt case remains one of Michigan's oldest unsolved disappearances. Mara muted the television and leaned back. He'd grown up 2 towns over from White Pines. Her mother had walked the Holt search lines with neighbors, came home hoarse and half frozen, and Mara grew up knowing what a missing child does to a town. When the State Historical Division asked her to lead the preservation, she didn't hesitate. 2 days later, she drove north through sleet. The road into White Pines was lined with bare trees that looked like ribs against the pale sky. The town itself seemed suspended in another decade. A diner, a feed store, a church steeple leaning slightly west. At the sheriff's office, a deputy escorted her to the evidence room. The tin box sat sealed inside a transparent case. "Chain of custody started at the demo site," the deputy said. "No tampering." Mara slipped on cotton gloves, unclipped the lid, and lifted the pages one by one. The pencil had faded, but the writing was remarkably intact. The first entry read like any child's diary. April 2nd, 1968. Dad fixed my bike. Mom says I should write things down so I remember what I think. I think summer smells like paint and grass. I think the woods behind the lake have eyes. Mara frowned. The line felt older than 11. She turned the page. April 5th. The man at the edge of the water waved again. I told him my name. He said he already knew. A chill traced her spine. That night, she checked into the Pine Lodge Motel. Cracked neon, one working heater, the smell of cedar. She laid out photocopies of the first 10 pages across the bedspread and began transcribing by lamplight. Samuel wrote almost every day until mid-December 1968. His tone shifted halfway through, from boyish excitement to unease. He mentioned dreams about the lake, whispers in the trees, and a light that blinked like a heartbeat. Mara read until her eyes blurred. The last page stopped mid-sentence. He said the water keeps secrets, but it never forgets. Then nothing. Morning brought gray light and the smell of rain. Mara drove to the address listed on the demolition permit, the former Holt property, now an empty lot overlooking the frozen lake. Only the foundation remained. Moss-covered stone, bits of glass glittering in the dirt. A single oak tree leaned over what had been the backyard. She stood there for a long time, the cold biting through her gloves, the diary pages flickering in her thoughts like ghosts. When she turned to leave, something caught her eye, half buried near the roots of the oak. A small metal tag, the kind used for labeling luggage. She brushed off mud. One word etched in worn letters, SAM. The same tag appeared in a photo from 1968, the one of Samuel's bike by the lake. Mara slipped it into her pocket, heart pounding. She didn't believe in coincidences. Back at the motel, she opened her laptop and began a field log. Case, the Holt diary. Location, White Pines, MI subject. Missing child, presumed drowned. Objective, authenticate materials. Identify contextual anomalies. Under anomalies, she typed, diary condition inconsistent with 57 years underground. Graphite remains stable. Final entry suggests prior knowledge of threat. Then she stopped typing because the heater clicked off, though she hadn't moved. The silence was absolute. She turned slowly toward the window. Outside, through the fogged glass, a faint reflection stared back. Small, pale, standing at the edge of the parking lot. A boy, no older than 11, wearing a winter coat from another century. Before Mara could react, the shape blinked out, replaced by her own reflection and the dull glow of the motel sign. Her pulse hammered. She laughed under her breath. Nerves, exhaustion, suggestion. But when she glanced back at the desk, she saw moisture beading on the pages she'd laid out. Drops of water, cold and perfect, as if lifted straight from the lake. Morning light crept pale and thin through the motel blinds. Dr. Mara Ellison woke to the hiss of the radiator and the taste of metal in her mouth. She dreamed of water, slow, dark, soundless. The photocopies of Samuel Holt's diary still covered the desk, curling at the corners from the damp that hadn't been there the night before. She wiped the droplets away and told herself the condensation came from the faulty heater. But part of her, the quiet, unscientific part, knew better. She made coffee and opened her field notebook. Step 1. Forensic analysis of graphite pressure indentations. Forensic specialists could reveal erased or faded words by using oblique light and dusting powder. She didn't have a full lab here, but she'd brought a portable magnifier and a sheet of mylar film for graphite lifts. She laid one diary page flat, adjusting the lamplight to catch shallow grooves invisible to the naked eye. At first, nothing. Then, under the low angle, faint ridges appeared, pencil strokes pressed into the paper without graphite. She rubbed the surface gently with black toner powder and watched the ghost of a sentence emerge, letter by letter. He says the lake remembers faces. Mara's breath left her in a short exhale. She checked the date in the corner of the page. October 29th, 1968. The same week, Samuel's teacher had noted him absent from school for 2 days. She worked through another page, more indentations, half phrases. The man by the water. Don't tell Mom. He left something in the ice house. The words crawled across the paper like whispers caught mid-breath. By mid-morning, she drove to the old sheriff's office. The new deputy, Tom Ritter, was barely 30 and still wore his nervousness like a new uniform. He recognized her immediately. "You're the doctor with the diary," he said, shaking her hand. "Sheriff told me to give you access to the archives." The archives were a single room that smelled of mildew and dust. Inside, dozens of cardboard boxes held everything from old traffic citations to the original Holt case file. Mara found the folder within minutes, a slim stack of yellowed reports and Polaroids. The incident summary read, December 14th, 1968. Subject Samuel Holt missing. Presumed drowned. Bicycle located 10 feet from shoreline. Minor scuffing on frame. Water search negative. Snow began 14:30. Search suspended after 4 days. No mention of witnesses. No fingerprints. No evidence of foul play. But one document caught her attention. An interview sheet from October, 2 months before the disappearance. The reporting party. Mrs. Carol Holt. Statement. Samuel said he met a man by the lake who talks through the ice. I checked. Nobody there. He's been sleepwalking. Said he hears knocking at night. Please advise. The sheriff at the time had written a single note in the margin. Likely imaginary friend. No further action. Mara stared at the words, heart thudding. A child's imagination, dismissed. And then he'd vanished. Outside, the sky hung low and colorless, promising snow. She walked to the edge of White Pines Lake. The surface was half frozen, a sheet of dull silver broken by black seams of open water. She crouched near the spot where Samuel's bicycle had been found. The reeds still grew there, dry and whispering in the wind. Something about the air felt charged, not haunted exactly, but aware. When she looked down, she noticed a cluster of smooth stones arranged in a small circle, the kind of thing children built for games or rituals. At the center sat a flat stone carved with faint letters, S.H. She brushed it clean. The engraving looked new. A sound echoed across the lake, a low, hollow knock. Then another, like wood against ice. Mara turned, scanning the shoreline. Nothing moved. The sound came again, closer now, rhythmic. 3 slow beats, then silence. Wind swept through the reeds, carrying a smell she couldn't place. Not rot, not fish, but something older, metallic, like blood diluted in water. She stood abruptly and stepped back. The sound stopped. Only her own breathing filled the air. She walked to her car faster than she meant to, trying not to look back at the lake. That night, she spread the diary pages across the motel bed again. Each entry she decoded told a story that grew darker. November 10th. He came again. Says the water talks if you listen close. I heard something say my name. It sounded like me. November 17th. He showed me the place under the ice house. Said it's where people go when they forget who they are. Mara pulled up the 1968 property maps on her laptop. The ice house had stood at the far edge of Holt's land, near the boathouse. The structure had collapsed in the 1980s and been buried under soil and weeds. She stared at the glowing screen until her reflection blurred. Her professional instincts told her she was chasing folklore. That memory could bend under trauma, that small towns mythologized tragedy. But something inside her, the same part that had felt the cold breath of the lake that afternoon, told her Samuel's words were pointing somewhere real. At 11:43 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Silence. Hello? The line hissed with static. Then a voice, faint, high, childlike. Is this the lady with my book? Mara froze. Who is this? The voice giggled, a small, wet sound. You found my pages. You shouldn't read the last one. The call ended. She stared at the screen. No caller ID, no log in the recent call list. Her pulse pounded in her throat. She opened the diary, flipping to the final page again. December 14th, 1968. The faint writing, barely visible, seemed darker now, as if fresh lead had surfaced from the fibers. He knows. And beneath it, something new she hadn't seen before. A faint outline of a shape pressed into the paper, like a symbol. She tilted it under the light. It looked like a circle split by 3 vertical lines. Mara traced it with her fingertip, feeling the raised grooves. The air in the room seemed to drop in temperature. Outside, in the parking lot, a reflection passed across her window. Small, quick, child-sized. This time, she didn't look away. The snow came overnight, soft and wet, clinging to branches, muting the town's usual sounds. When Mara Ellison woke, the world beyond her window looked bleached and still. The lake was gone beneath a white sheet, as if erased. She dressed in layers, packed her field bag, and checked her phone. No new messages. The number that had called her the night before had vanished from the log, as though it had never existed. By 8, she was driving toward the old Holt property. Her tires crunched through fresh snow, and fog rose from the frozen water like breath. She parked near the oak tree where she'd found the luggage tag days earlier and followed the faint trail toward the ruins of the ice house. The path wound through skeletal birch trees, their bark peeling like old paper. The ice house had once stored blocks of frozen lake water through the summers. Now it was just a depression in the earth, rimmed by broken timbers and rusted hinges. A half-buried foundation stone jutted from the snow, engraved faintly with the year 1919. She stood at the edge of the pit and listened. Nothing but the soft hiss of wind. Then she heard it. That same hollow knock, distant, rhythmic. 3 beats. Silence. 3 more. Her breath clouded in the cold. She scanned the pit. No movement, no sound except the faint creak of ice somewhere beneath the snow. She climbed down carefully, boots sliding on the frozen slope. The smell down there was strange, metallic, earthy, like damp iron. Near one wall she saw an opening, a narrow gap between stones leading into darkness. Mara crouched, shining her flashlight inside. The beam caught something that shouldn't have been there. Wood paneling, intact, untouched by time. Her pulse quickened. The diary had mentioned the place under the ice house. She widened the opening with a crowbar from her kit and slipped through. The crawl space opened into a small chamber. Wooden shelves lined the walls, covered in dust and cobwebs. The air was dry, impossibly dry for a place that had spent decades buried beneath frost. She swept the beam across the shelves. Jars, broken tools, an oil lantern collapsed on its side. And then, on the far shelf, a small tin whistle. She picked it up carefully. The surface was etched with the same symbol from the diary, a circle crossed by 3 vertical lines. Her hand trembled. She bagged the whistle in an evidence pouch and kept moving. At the back of the chamber, the dirt wall was darker, softer, recently disturbed. She knelt and brushed away a thin layer of soil until her fingers struck wood. Something buried. A box. She dug until she could lift it free. A small crate sealed with nails, no larger than a shoebox. The lid came loose easily, the wood splintering under her grip. Inside were fragments of newspaper, a handful of children's marbles, and a photograph. The photo was black and white, curled with age. 4 children stood in front of the same lake, 2 boys, 2 girls, all between 10 and 12. One of them was Samuel Holt. The others she didn't recognize. But in the corner, faint pencil marks read, Summer 1963, 5 years before Samuel vanished. She flipped it over. A line written in faint blue ink ran along the back. He picks one every 5 years. Mara's pulse spiked. She stuffed the photo back into the box and climbed out of the pit, breath coming fast. The air outside felt too bright, the snow almost blinding. She turned toward her car and froze. Footprints led from the tree line to her vehicle. Small ones, bare. By the time she reached the car, the prints stopped at the driver's side door. No one was there. The snow was unbroken beyond that point. She sat behind the wheel, heart pounding, staring at her own pale reflection in the rear-view mirror. Behind her, the field was empty. She drove straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Ritter was on duty again, and the color drained from his face when he saw the photo. 1963? That's 5 years before Holt. He flipped through the case files on his desk. Wait, we had another missing kid that year. A girl, Lacey Morin. Went ice skating, never came back. thought she fell through thin ice. Mara felt a chill spread through her. "Did you ever find her body?" He shook his head. "Not a trace." She laid the photo flat. "That's her," she said, pointing to the second girl in the picture. "Same face as the yearbook photo online." Ritter looked closer. "Then, who took this photo?" The angle suggested the photographer was standing waist-deep in the lake. Mara didn't answer. That evening, back at the motel, she pored over every page of the diary again. The sequence of entries began to take shape as something like a pattern. 5-year intervals, each with vague mentions of the lake calling. In the margin of the November 30th page, faint impressions showed through from an earlier erased note. She rubbed gently with graphite powder until words appeared. "He says the water takes what the town forgets." She looked up, suddenly aware of her reflection in the dark window, her own face framed by the pages spread out on the bed. Outside, snowflakes spiraled down in perfect silence. Then, from somewhere beyond the glass, came a single, clear whistle. 3 notes, low and hollow, the sound of a tin whistle played by someone very small. Mara turned off the lamp and stood in darkness. The whistle came again, closer now, directly outside her window. She forced herself to look. Through the frost, she saw him. A boy standing ankle-deep in snow, face turned up toward the light. Eyes pale and glassy, mouth half open as if breathing water instead of air. He lifted a hand and pointed toward the lake. The sound of the whistle faded into the hum of the motel heater kicking back on. When she blinked, he was gone. On the windowsill, something small gleamed under the lamplight, a marble, wet and glistening, etched with the same 3-lined symbol. Mara sat down slowly, the weight of the discovery pressing through her chest like a heartbeat she didn't own. She whispered to herself, "He picks one every 5 years." She flipped open her notebook, staring at the cadence. 1953, 1958, 1963, 1968. Then a skipped beat in 1973 and 1978. The disappearances had stopped after 83, the year the ice house collapsed. Until now. Outside, the snow kept falling. In the distance, faint and steady, came the sound of water cracking under ice, the lake exhaling. In the summer of 1987, 2 teenagers vanished from a county fair in Harper, Texas. Locals said they ran away. Police called it a lover's quarrel. But 38 years later, the drought dropped the water level of Harper Creek. And something surfaced that was never meant to be found. This is the story of what really happened that night, and why the people who buried it swore they never would speak again. Before watching, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. August 14th, 1987. The fairground lights glowed like dying stars above the dirt lot. Even at 10 p.m., the air was heavy with the scent of popcorn oil and diesel. The laughter of teenagers drifted over the hum of the generators, fading into the dark beyond the Ferris wheel. Sarah Miller, 17, leaned against the hood of her boyfriend's car, a white '77 Monte Carlo that rattled like a thunderstorm whenever the bass kicked in. Her bare legs stuck slightly to the sun-warmed metal. She looked toward the rides, where the crowds were thinning, and frowned. "Luke's been gone too long," she muttered. Her best friend, Rachel Pike, twisted the cap off a bottle of orange soda. "You know Luke, probably showing off at the shooting booth again." Sarah smiled despite her irritation. Luke Tanner was 19, brash and endlessly restless. He'd been talking all week about leaving Harper County, heading for Austin to record music, and never looked back. He'd said he wanted Sarah to come, but Sarah wasn't sure. Her mother was sick, her little brother still in school. Harper was a small, stagnant place, but it was home. Rachel nudged her. "You're thinking too much again." "Just tired." They sat in silence, the night pressing closer. The music from the fair faded to a distant hum. Somewhere near the creek, frogs croaked. Then, a sound. Tires crunching gravel. Headlights sweeping across the trees. Sarah turned, expecting Luke's Monte Carlo. Instead, a black pickup idled at the edge of the lot. 2 figures sat inside. The driver waved. Rachel squinted. "Do you know him?" Sarah hesitated. The man was familiar, maybe from the gas station or church. Older, mid-30s, maybe 40. The passenger was just a shadow. When Sarah didn't respond, Rachel huffed. "Come on, let's just go find Luke." They gathered their things, tossing half-empty drinks into the trash. The fair was almost packed up now. Vendors closing stalls, lights flickering off one by one. As they walked past the exit, the black pickup rolled forward, slow and deliberate. The driver leaned out. "Need a lift, girls?" "Roads are dark this way." Rachel laughed uneasily. "We're fine, thanks." He smiled. There was something wrong about that smile. Too still, too sure. "You sure?" "Harper Creek gets mean after midnight." Sarah's hand found Rachel's. "We're fine," she repeated, and kept walking. The truck didn't move. Its engine idled, low and steady. When they reached the fairground gate, Sarah looked back. The pickup's lights were off now. Just darkness where it had been. A faint unease crawled up her spine. "Let's go the long way," she whispered. They cut through the field behind the fairgrounds, the grass brushing their jeans, cicadas screaming in the trees. The moon was high and thin, just enough to light the path toward the dirt road where Luke had parked. Then, a sound again. Footsteps behind them. Rachel turned. Probably Luke, but it wasn't. A shape moved between the trees, tall, broad-shouldered, steady in stride. Another figure flanked him, smaller, younger. Sarah's heart picked up speed. "Run!" They bolted across the clearing, grass tearing beneath their feet. The truck engine roared back to life somewhere behind them. Rachel screamed, and it cut off, swallowed by the dark. Sarah didn't look back. She ran toward the faint glint of moonlight on metal. The Monte Carlo. The driver's door was open. Luke wasn't there. Then came the pain, sudden, electric, something striking the back of her head. The world tilted. Stars burst across her vision. She fell to her knees, the smell of gasoline sharp in the dirt. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard a voice. Low, calm, almost kind. "Easy now. You'll be all right." A flash of white light. A flashlight beam. A glimpse of a man's hand, rough and scarred. A silver ring on his thumb. Then darkness. When the sheriff's deputies found Luke's car 2 days later, the seats were soaked in creek water. No sign of Sarah, no sign of Rachel. Just a single white shoe lodged beneath the brake pedal. The Harper County Fair reopened the next year. The creek dried in summer, flooded in fall, and the case, like so many others, went cold. Until 2025. The drought had stripped Harper County bare. For the first time in 40 years, the bed of Harper Creek cracked open like sun-baked skin, the air thick with the sour smell of silt and fish rot. Sheriff Eli Grant squinted through the windshield of his pickup as he pulled off the rural road and into the clearing where a half-dozen emergency vehicles crowded the banks. He'd seen the drought chew through lakes before, but not like this. Not enough to reveal what the earth had kept hidden. A deputy jogged up as he climbed out. "Sheriff, you're going to want to see this." Eli adjusted his hat and followed the deputy down the muddy slope. The sun had already dipped behind the tree line, leaving the sky bruised and violet. Crickets filled the silence, that same endless Texas hum that never quite died. At the bottom of the creek bed, yellow tape fluttered. A small team of forensics techs knelt beside a shallow trench. In it lay bones, not animal, not random. A human skeleton curled as if still shielding itself from something unseen. "Jesus," Eli muttered. The tech glanced up, At least 3 decades old, maybe more. Anyone call the university lab? They're on the way from Austin. You want to see this, though? The deputy pointed with his flashlight. Half buried in the mud beside the bones was something metallic. A pendant, dull and dented, its chain half snapped. Eli crouched, brushing the dirt away with his gloved thumb. The faint outline of an engraved letter shimmered beneath the grime. An S. He felt a tug in his memory, the way the name had haunted every Harper County file drawer since 1987. Sarah Miller, 17, last seen leaving the county fair. Missing, presumed runaway. The sheriff straightened, staring at the creek as if it might answer him. "Get this secured," he said quietly, "and call the county coroner. We're reopening the Miller-Pike file." By the time the scene lights went up, word had already spread. Harper was small, too small for secrets, though somehow it had managed to keep this one. Across town, the Harper diner was half empty except for locals glued to their phones. The news alert had hit every screen before the county even made a statement. Remains found at Harper Creek. Possible link to 1987 disappearance. In a corner booth, a woman in her 50s sat very still, her hand frozen around a coffee mug gone cold. Her name was Lydia Pike, Rachel's younger sister. She'd been 12 when Rachel vanished. She still lived in Harper, managing the diner her parents had owned. When the news anchor repeated the words, "cold case," Lydia's throat tightened. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Pike," a man's voice said. "This is Sheriff Grant." "I'd like to speak with you when you can come by the station." Lydia swallowed. "You found them, didn't you?" "Too soon to say," he replied. His voice was steady, careful. "But I think we finally have something." The next morning broke flat and gray. Reporters had already gathered at the county courthouse, their vans parked crooked along the curb. Harper hadn't seen this much attention in decades. Inside, Sheriff Grant sifted through the original 1987 files. The paper smelled of mildew and failure. Polaroids of the fairground. Statements from teenagers now old enough to have grandchildren. An entire life's worth of grief and speculation. He flipped open the last page. The last entry from the previous sheriff. Case closed. Insufficient evidence. Probable voluntary disappearance. Eli sighed. Hell of a call to make on 2 kids who left everything behind. The door opened. Lydia Pike stepped in, clutching her purse like a shield. She looked like someone who had spent a lifetime waiting for the phone to ring. "Thank you for coming, ma'am," Eli said, standing. "I know this isn't easy." She nodded once, eyes scanning the cluttered desk. "You found Sarah's necklace, didn't you?" He blinked. "How'd you know it was hers?" "She wore it every day." S for Sarah. My sister had one too, an R. They bought them at the fair that night. Eli studied her face, the way she kept her composure like someone used to carrying loss quietly. "We haven't confirmed the identity yet. The lab's running dental and DNA, but I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to look over the old photos, maybe help us reconstruct where they might have gone that night." Lydia hesitated, then sat. "I never stopped looking," she said, "even when they told me to let it go." By evening, the remains had been transported to Austin for analysis. The forensic team had found fragments of a second set of bones tangled in the mud. Smaller, delicate, possibly female. And nearby, in a tangle of roots, they'd recovered something else, a cracked Polaroid. Its colors long faded but shape still visible. 2 teenage girls smiling beneath a Ferris wheel. Behind them, a dark pickup truck parked just beyond the fence line. Eli stared at it under the evidence light, the hair on his arms prickling. The file number stamped on the back read, Number 87-214, Harper County Fair. He turned the photo over, eyes narrowing at a smudge of ink on the bottom edge. A handwritten note, nearly erased by time. "She said we'd make it out tonight." He looked out the window toward the dark stretch of county road leading toward the creek. The drought had brought the bones back, but something else was rising with them. Something Harper had buried in more ways than one. The smell of old files clung to the sheriff's office long after Lydia left. By the time she pulled into the gravel lot behind her diner, the sun had already sunk below the pecan trees, leaving the windows mirrored black. She sat for a long moment with the engine idling, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles blanched. Inside, the diner hummed with its usual late-night rhythm, the coffee machine sputtering, the jukebox sighing out country ballads nobody really listened to. A few regulars nodded at her as she passed, but she didn't stop to chat. She went straight to the back booth by the window, the one where Rachel used to sit after school, hair tied in a red ribbon, daydreaming about leaving Harper behind. Lydia still set a napkin and a glass of water at that seat every year on August 14th, a ritual no one talked about anymore. She took a slow breath, pulled her phone from her purse, and scrolled through the day's news updates. Remains believed to belong to missing Harper teens, unearthed after decades. Every headline hit the same way: clinical, detached, a story for the world, but a wound reopened for her. A bell jingled as someone entered. Lydia didn't look up until a voice said softly, "Still open?" A man in his late 30s stood near the door, wearing a denim jacket dusted with road dirt. He had that weary look of someone who'd spent a lifetime chasing ghosts. Jonas Quinn, the Austin reporter who'd covered every cold case within 100 miles. "I heard they found something," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "And I heard you were there." Lydia frowned. "You drove all the way from Austin for rumors?" He smiled faintly. "Rumors are what truth grows out of. Not everything needs to grow," she replied. They sat in silence for a moment, the ticking of the wall clock loud between them. Jonas lowered his voice. "My editor's been pushing for a feature. The Harper Creek Girls. They think people want resolution, but I think they want guilt." Someone to hate Lydia studied him. "And what do you want?" His answer came slow. "The truth. Whatever shape it's taken after all these years that night." Lydia dreamed again. Rachel laughing under the Ferris wheel lights, spinning in circles with her arms wide, the hem of her dress catching the wind. Then the sound of gravel, tires, headlights, that black truck idling by the gate. Lydia had been 12, waiting at home that night. Their mother had fallen asleep on the couch, cigarette burning low in the ashtray. Lydia had watched the headlights of every car that passed their house, imagining which one might be Rachel's. But Rachel never came home. By morning, the sheriff had come instead, hat in hand, eyes already apologizing for what he hadn't yet said. The next day, Lydia stood by the creek again. The air smelled of clay and decay. Forensics teams worked methodically, combing through the riverbed with gloved precision. Sheriff Grant met her at the tape line. "Got word from Austin," he said. "Preliminary match to Sarah Miller. DNA's pending confirmation, but it's strong." Lydia's throat tightened. "And Rachel?" He hesitated. "We found fragments near the same site. Could be hers. We'll know soon." She nodded, her face unreadable. "You think someone from here did it?" "Someone always does," he said quietly. "Small towns just hide it better." She looked out over the cracked creek bed, the mud curling in brittle ridges. "My sister trusted people. She thought everyone was a story waiting to be told. I guess she was right." That evening, Jonas found her closing the diner. He carried an old camera slung over his shoulder. "Mind if I show you something?" Lydia hesitated, then nodded. He set a worn folder on the counter. Inside were photocopies of police reports, grainy photographs, and a few handwritten notes. "I pulled these from the state archive," he said. "You know who filed the first missing person report?" "Sarah's mother," Lydia said automatically. Jonas shook his head. "It was a mechanic named Frank Dyer. Said he saw two girls running near the old service road that night. Said they were being chased by a black truck. Lydia frowned. That wasn't in the official file. It was pulled, Jonas said. Someone marked it as unreliable witness testimony. Dyer moved out of state in the 90s, died 10 years ago. But I found his daughter in San Marcos. She says her dad never stopped talking about that night. He leaned closer. He told her he saw one of the men's faces. Lydia's pulse quickened. You think it's true? Jonas nodded. He described a ring. Silver, thumb finger, shaped like a coiled snake. Lydia froze. The memory hit her like a punch. The day Rachel got her ears pierced at the fair, the man running the booth. He dropped something from his hand, a flash of silver on his thumb, as he laughed and said, "Careful. Pretty girls like you shouldn't bleed too much." She had forgotten that detail. Until now. Do you remember his name? Jonas asked quietly. She shook her head. No, but I remember his eyes. Pale, like glass. Jonas closed his notebook. Then we might just have our first real lead. Later that night, Lydia locked the diner and stood in the empty parking lot. The cicadas were louder than usual, the kind of endless hum that felt almost human. She looked toward the west, where Harper Creek glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and whispered, "We're getting you home, Rach." A truck engine rumbled somewhere far off, a deep, familiar growl that made her skin crawl. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw headlights cutting through the trees. Then nothing but darkness. The next morning, Harper County woke to the sound of news vans. They lined Main Street like a second parade. Tripods, satellite dishes, microphones aimed toward the courthouse steps where Sheriff Eli Grant gave the same statement he'd rehearsed half the night. Remains have been recovered from Harper Creek. Identification is pending. The investigation into the 1987 disappearance of Sarah Miller and Rachel Pike is now officially reopened. Cameras clicked. Someone shouted questions. Eli's jaw worked under the strain of measured patience. The town had lived in silence for nearly 4 decades. Now everyone wanted a piece of its ghosts. When the reporters dispersed, Jonas Quinn was the only one still standing near the steps. "You don't look like a man who believes in coincidence," he said. Eli eyed him. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither are they," Jonas replied, nodding toward the creek in the distance. "Mind if I ask you something off the record?" Eli sighed. "You're gonna ask anyway." Jonas pulled a small photograph from his jacket pocket, the faded Polaroid of the girls under the Ferris wheel. He pointed to the shadowy truck in the background. "You ever run plates from 1987? "Old records got lost in a courthouse flood back in 98, Eli said. "Why?" "I think the driver owned more than one truck." Eli frowned. "You've been digging." Jonas nodded. "A man named Clint Harrow, local handyman, used to do odd jobs at the fairgrounds. Arrested twice, once in 86 for assault, once in 88 for trespassing. Charges dropped both times." "Who dropped them?" "Sheriff Tom Ralston." Eli's stomach tightened. Ralston had been his mentor, the man who'd handed him his badge 20 years ago. "You saying the old sheriff covered something up?" Jonas's tone softened. "I'm saying Harrow had friends in uniform, the kind that bury mistakes in mud and call it mercy." That afternoon, Eli drove out to the edge of town where Harrow's old property still stood. A single-story shack half swallowed by kudzu and time. The porch sagged under its own weight. A rusted for sale sign tilted in the yard. He ducked beneath the caution tape someone had tied across the door and stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the thin bars of light slanting through the broken blinds. The place smelled like rain-soaked wood and something older, forgotten. A table stood near the center of the room, covered with yellowed newspapers, hunting knives, and empty liquor bottles. On the wall hung a cracked mirror. Eli caught his reflection, and then something else, a glint of metal wedged in the floorboards below. He crouched, pried it loose with his pocket knife, and held it up. a silver ring, coiled into the shape of a serpent, its head forming the clasp. The same ring Jonas had described. He stared at it for a long moment, feeling the past crawl out of its grave. At the county office later, Eli dropped the ring into an evidence bag and called Jonas. "You were right," he said. "Harrow owned a ring like that. I found it at his place." Jonas whistled softly. "He's still alive. Died in 2009. Heart attack. No family. So the ring outlived him." Eli leaned back in his chair. "You ever get the feeling the dead don't stay dead here?" "Depends who's listening," Jonas said. That evening, Lydia closed up the diner early. The news about Harrow had reached her before the sheriff could call. Small-town telegraph still faster than any official statement. She sat on her porch with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at the field that led toward the fairgrounds. She remembered Harrow now, the man who fixed the generators at the fair, always smelling of oil and cigarettes. The way he'd lingered too long when handing back Rachel's dropped comb. She hadn't thought of him in years. Or maybe she had, in dreams she couldn't quite remember. A car pulled into her driveway, headlights off, quiet. Her pulse jumped until she saw Sheriff Grant step out. "Sorry for dropping by late," he said, approaching the porch steps. "Figured you'd want to hear it from me." Lydia motioned for him to sit. "It's Harrow, isn't it?" "Looks that way," he admitted. "But I don't think he worked alone." She looked at him sharply. "What makes you say that?" Eli hesitated. "The ring. It's old, handmade. Found records from a pawn shop in '87, 2 identical pieces sold the same week. One to Harrow, the other to someone named Reed Carnes." The name hit Lydia like ice water. Carnes. "I know that name. He used to own a salvage yard in San Marcos," Eli said. "Closed down after his brother got arrested for a federal weapons charge." Reed vanished not long after Lydia's mind flickered back to something her father once said. The night Rachel disappeared, he'd seen a pickup parked near Harper Creek. Dark blue, maybe black, he'd told the deputy. Had a dent on the tailgate like a boot print. Eli showed her the Polaroid. "This look familiar?" Her breath caught. The truck behind the girls, faint but visible, had the same dent. Back in town, Jonas sat in his motel room, replaying the day's interview recordings. He stopped on Lydia's voice, soft but firm. Rachel thought everyone was a story waiting to be told. He opened his laptop and searched the name Reed Carnes. A few old citations popped up. Traffic violations, unpaid taxes, then nothing after 1989. It was like the man had vanished. But one record stood out. A bill of sale from a scrapyard auction dated June 1990. Purchaser, R. Carnes. Item, 1977 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Non-operational, flood damage. Jonas's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled further. The VIN matched Luke Tanner's 1977 Chevrolet Monte Carlo per the incident report. He grabbed his phone and dialed the sheriff. "Eli, it's Jonas. I think I found your Monte Carlo. Carnes bought it 3 years after the girls vanished." A long pause. "Where?" "Warehouse lot outside San Marcos. And Eli, the deed's still active. Someone's been paying the taxes Eli drove out before dawn. Tires kicking up dust as the first pink light bled over the horizon. The warehouse sat at the end of a gravel road, locked behind a chain-link fence. He cut the engine, listening to the wind whistle through the gaps. A motion light flickered on, and from inside the warehouse came the faint creak of a door opening. Slow, deliberate, human. Eli's hand went to his holster. He called out, "Sheriff's Department." No answer. Then, from the darkness within, a low voice, calm and gravelly. "You found what you were looking for, Sheriff?" Eli froze. The voice was old, worn thin by time, but it carried the same slow cadence he'd heard on the old interview tapes from the '87 file. The voice of Reed Carnes. The warehouse door hung half open. creaking on its rusted hinge. Sheriff Eli Grant stood just outside the threshold, his flashlight cutting through the stale air. Dust drifted like ash in the beam. "Harper County Sheriff's Department," he called again, voice echoing through the emptiness. "If someone's inside, show me your hands." Silence, then a shuffling sound, the scrape of boots on concrete. A man stepped out from the shadows. He was older than Eli expected, somewhere in his 70s, face drawn and leathery like sun-cracked leather. His gray hair hung in wisps beneath a dirty cap, and a faint scar traced his jawline. He wasn't armed, at least not visibly. His hands hung loose, palms open. "Didn't mean to startle you, Sheriff," he said. His voice had a dry rasp, the kind that came from years of smoke and secrets. "Name's Reed Carnes." Eli kept his flashlight steady. "You've been hard to find. That's the point of leaving, son. You don't want to be found funny," Eli said. "Most men who disappear don't keep paying taxes on their land." A crooked smile tugged at the man's lips. "You found the Monte Carlo, didn't you?" Eli didn't answer. "Step away from the shadows, please." Carnes obeyed, slow and deliberate. The beam of light caught the glint of something silver on his hand. A ring, coiled like a serpent. Eli's gut tightened. "You mind telling me where you got that?" Carnes glanced down at it, turning it slightly between his fingers. "Gift. Long time ago. Back when I still had a friend to drink with Clint Harrow." Carnes chuckled softly. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in years." "Poor bastard." "You two worked the fairgrounds together." "Worked everything together. We built half the county's junk in those days. Rides, booths, repairs. You could say we kept the fun spinning." Eli's jaw set. "And the girls?" The smile faded. Carnes looked past him toward the door, as if measuring the distance to freedom. "I didn't touch those girls, Sheriff." "Then why'd you run?" "Because I knew who did. And I knew no one would believe me." Eli motioned to a folding chair near the wall. "Sit down." Carnes hesitated, then obeyed. He moved like an old animal, cautious, aware of every sound. Eli lowered his voice. "You owned a black pickup in '87. Carnes nodded slowly. "Had two. The black one and an old blue Ford. Both long gone now. One of them was seen near the fairgrounds the night Sarah Miller and Rachel Pike disappeared." "I heard." Eli took out the Polaroid and set it on the table between them. "Recognize this?" Carnes leaned forward, squinting under the light. "Yeah, that's Clint's truck. You can tell by the dent on the tailgate. You sure it's not yours?" Carnes shook his head. "No, sir. That dent came from a county truck hitch. Clint backed into it one summer, cursed for a week straight." "So you're saying Harrow took the girls?" Carnes' eyes darkened. "Took one. The other tried to stop him. She didn't make it far." Eli's chest went tight. "You saw it?" Carnes nodded once. "I told Ralston. He said he'd take care of it." "Sheriff Ralston?" "Yeah. Said the Miller girl came from a bad home. The Pike girl ran off with her. Told me to forget it, or I'd be looking at accessory charges." Eli's hand stilled on his notebook. The room felt smaller suddenly. "You kept quiet for 38 years. "I left town," Carnes said flatly. "Thought I could outrun it. But you can't outrun ghosts, Sheriff. Not the kind that keep you up nights." Eli studied him. The man's voice wavered not from fear, but from memory. The kind that stains every breath. "You said Harrow took one of them. What about Sarah?" Carnes looked down at his hands. "She was alive when they drove off. He told me he was just going to scare 'em, make them stop sneaking around the fairgrounds at night. When he came back," his throat tightened, "he was covered in mud. Said the truck got stuck near the creek. Did you help him bury them?" Carnes' jaw clenched. "I helped him move the car. He made me. Said he'd tell everyone I was the one behind it if I didn't. And the car? Dropped it in the creek. Weighted it down. That's why you never found it." Eli leaned forward. Why now, Carnes? Why show yourself? The old man's eyes met his, clear and sharp despite the years. Because the creek gave them back. Means time's up for the rest of us too. Outside, dawn had started bleeding into the horizon, pale pinks and bruised golds over the scrubland. The sheriff led Carnes out toward the cruiser, the metal cuffs clinking softly around the old man's wrists. Carnes didn't fight. He just glanced toward the dried creek bed in the distance and said, "You ever notice how water remembers where it's been, Sheriff? Even when it dries up, the earth keeps the mark." Eli didn't answer. He opened the cruiser door, helped Carnes inside, and closed it with a dull click. As he drove back toward Harper, he couldn't shake the feeling that the confession had come too easily, too rehearsed. Carnes had given him the truth, but not all of it. In the rearview mirror, the old man stared straight ahead, lips barely moving. Eli turned the radio off, but he still heard the whisper. Clint wasn't the only one. When they reached the county jail, Jonas was waiting. "You got him," the reporter said, eyes wide. Eli nodded. "He says Harrow took the girls." "That he helped move the car," Jonas frowned. "Then why's he still breathing?" "What do you mean? If he really saw Harrow kill them, why didn't Harrow kill him too?" Eli looked through the window at Carnes sitting in the holding cell, head bowed in the dim light. "That's the question," he said quietly. "And I think we're going to need to dig deeper, not just into the creek, but into this whole damn town." That night, thunder rolled over Harper County. The drought had finally broken, rain hammering against the earth that had held its secrets too long. And somewhere in the black water now rising again, something shifted, something that hadn't been buried as deep as everyone thought. By the time dawn broke, the rain had turned Harper Creek back into a river. The water tore through the dry gullies with violent purpose, swallowing the excavation site, scattering what little evidence they hadn't yet cataloged. Sheriff Eli Grant stood beneath the hood of his raincoat, watching as deputies waded through knee-deep mud, trying to secure what they could. The wind carried the sour smell of turned earth and gasoline. "Get those samples bagged," he shouted over the rain, "and keep the cameras rolling. If it moves, I want it recorded." The storm had been building for days, as if nature itself had been waiting for its cue. Now it fell in sheets, erasing tire marks, footprints, the past itself. Inside a canvas tent pitched on higher ground, Lydia Pike sat wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on the dark torrent below. Her clothes were soaked through. Her hair clung in damp strands to her cheeks. She'd insisted on coming back, even when Eli told her the site wasn't safe. She couldn't explain it, only that she needed to be there. "You can't undo 38 years in a night," Eli told her gently, stepping inside. "I'm not trying to," she said. "I just don't want the rain to take her again." Eli crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "We've got enough to confirm Sarah's ID. The lab matched the dental records this morning." Lydia's expression didn't change, but her eyes glistened. "And Rachel?" "Still waiting." She nodded slowly. "My mother used to say the earth remembers everything, that when you plant lies deep enough, the roots turn to ghosts." Eli looked out at the water. "Your mother wasn't wrong." By noon, the rain had softened into a mist. Jonas arrived, camera wrapped in plastic, notebook tucked inside his jacket. His shoes squelched with every step as he joined Eli at the edge of the site. "He talked yet?" Jonas asked. "Carnes?" "Not much. Keeps repeating the same thing, that he helped move the car. But I don't buy it. He's leaving something out." Jonas frowned. "What about Ralston? You think the old sheriff knew?" Eli didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. Jonas exhaled, glancing at the swollen creek. "You think there's still something down there?" "Always is," Eli murmured. That night, the storm broke into fragments. The roads were slick, the sky still pulsing with distant lightning. Lydia closed the diner early again. She sat at the counter, lights dimmed, watching the reflections of passing cars ripple across the window. When the bell above the door chimed, she didn't look up. "Closed," she called softly. Footsteps paused. Then, "Didn't come for food." She turned. Reed Carnes stood in the doorway. Her heart slammed against her ribs. How did you get out?" He lifted his cuffed wrists. The chain hung broken. The storm knocked out the maglock and the backup bolt didn't throw. "Old hardware, Sheriff." The power blinked, and so did your deputy. She backed away, one hand reaching for the phone behind the counter. "If you came here to—" "I came to tell you the truth," he interrupted. His voice was low, urgent. "They think I killed your sister." "I didn't. But I saw who did Clint Harrow," she whispered. Carnes shook his head. "No, Clint started it, but he wasn't the one who finished it." Lydia's breath hitched. "Then who?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward the rain-streaked window. "Ralston wasn't just covering it up. He was there." The words hung between them like a struck bell. Before Lydia could speak, the diner lights flickered, then died. The hum of the refrigerator silenced, plunging the room into darkness. "Carnes?" she whispered. But he was already gone. Eli's radio crackled as he drove back from the creek. "Sheriff, we got a situation at Pike's Diner." A deputy's voice came through. "Possible break-in. Witness says the old man, Carnes, was seen heading that way." Eli swore under his breath and gunned the engine. The rain hit the windshield like gravel. When he reached the diner, Lydia stood outside in the glow of his headlights, drenched, shaking. "He was here," she said. "He told me Ralston was there that night." Eli felt something cold move through his chest. "Ralston's been dead 15 years. "I don't care," she said. "He's still in this." Inside, the floor was wet where Carnes had tracked in mud. Eli followed the prints, 2 sets, both leading toward the back door. But outside, the rain had already begun to wash them away. At the jailhouse, the holding cell was empty. The broken cuff chain lay on the bench, glinting in the dim light. Jonas arrived minutes later, breathless. "You lose him." "Looks that way," Eli said. "He went straight to Lydia." "Why her?" "Because she's the only one who'll believe him." Jonas stared at the open cell door. "You think he's lying?" "I think he's scared," Eli said. "And scared men don't run toward people. They run toward absolution." He looked down at the floor. Muddy footprints trailed from the cell to the exit. The tread was uneven, like someone dragging a leg. "Where's he heading?" Jonas asked. Eli's eyes lifted toward the rain-blurred window. "Back where it started." They found Carnes the next morning at the edge of the fairground. The rain had stopped. Mist hung low over the empty rides. He sat on the steps of the old shooting booth, soaked to the bone, staring out at the Ferris wheel that hadn't turned in years. Eli approached slowly. "Reed." Carnes didn't look up. "Didn't run far, did I?" "You came home," Eli said. "Why?" Carnes' voice was barely a whisper. "Because the ground talks when it rains, Sheriff, and it told me where to find her." He pointed toward the overgrown field beyond the fence. "Rachel. She's still there." Eli followed his gaze. The earth there was uneven, darker than the rest. A rise in the soil that hadn't been there before. Jonas lifted his camera. Breath caught in his throat. "You think he's right?" Eli didn't answer. He just stared at the Ferris wheel looming behind them, its rusted frame dripping water like tears. "Let's find out," he said. The fairgrounds had always been Harper's pride. In summer, it had shimmered with color. Fried dough smoke, carousel music, the gleam of tin prizes under string lights. Now, after nearly 4 decades of neglect, it was nothing but rust and ghosts. Sheriff Eli Grant parked his cruiser at the edge of the overgrown lot. Jonas's rental car pulled in behind him, headlights carving twin paths through the fog. A chill wind carried the metallic tang of wet iron. Carnes waited near the old shooting booth, his soaked jacket plastered to his shoulders. 2 deputies flanked him, their rifles slung low, but ready. He wasn't in cuffs this time, just weary, like a man who had stopped running from what was inevitable. "You sure about this?" Eli asked quietly. Carnes nodded toward the field beyond the fence. "Right over there, near the generator shed. She's under the elm roots." Been waiting long enough, the deputies set up portable floodlights. White light spilled across the tall grass and broken rides, transforming the place into a stage. Lydia arrived soon after, her face pale, her eyes hollow but sharp. "If he's lying again," she murmured. Eli handed her a flashlight. "Then we'll know by morning." The first shovel hit something solid just after midnight. A dull clink, unmistakable. The deputies slowed, working carefully until the outline of a shallow pit emerged. The smell of rot and damp earth was almost unbearable. When one of them unearthed a strip of faded fabric, Lydia's hand went to her mouth. It was sky blue, the color of Rachel's favorite dress. Eli crouched beside the pit, brushing the soil away gently. The remains beneath were delicate, almost skeletal, but the position was deliberate, as though someone had laid her down carefully, not hastily buried her. "She's here," he whispered. He was telling the truth. Carnes turned away, trembling. "I told her to leave that night. I begged her, but she wouldn't. She said Sarah was scared. Said she wouldn't leave her friend behind." Lydia looked up sharply. "You saw her?" "I saw them both." Sarah was already in the truck. Clint was drunk, waving that damn flashlight like a trophy. Rachel tried to pull her out, but his voice cracked. Ralston came out of nowhere, said to get back in the truck, that he'd handle it, but he didn't handle it. He ended it. Eli's pulse hammered. "You're saying Sheriff Tom Ralston killed Rachel Pike?" Carnes nodded. "Shot her when she ran. Said it was an accident. Said nobody would believe she wasn't involved." The words hung heavy in the air. Rainwater trickled through the disturbed soil, pooling around the bones like tears. By dawn, the medical examiner had arrived. The team worked in silence, cataloging every fragment, every thread. Jonas stood apart, his camera forgotten at his side. He'd seen plenty of stories about the past refusing to die, but never one that felt this personal. He glanced toward the Ferris wheel, a perfect silhouette against the rising sun. Somewhere inside its rusted spine, a single metal gondola creaked back and forth in the breeze. "Eli," he called softly. "Come look at this." The sheriff followed his gaze. The movement was steady, rhythmic, as if something inside was causing it to sway. Climbing the ladder, Eli's boots slipped on the wet steel. He reached the gondola and peered inside. At first, it looked empty. Then the light shifted. A small wooden box lay wedged under the seat. He pulled it free, wiped the grime from its surface. Inside were photographs. Polaroids curled with age, some stained with water, some still vivid. The girls, the fairgrounds, the creek. And in several of them, a man's face. Sheriff Tom Ralston. Lydia's breath caught when Eli laid the photos out on the hood of his cruiser. Her voice broke. "He was supposed to protect us." Jonas stared at the images, his journalist's instincts whirring behind his eyes. "This changes everything," he said. "He didn't just cover it up. He staged the investigation." Eli's expression hardened. He made everyone look the other way. And when Harrow died, he let the story die with him. Carnes spoke up from the back of the cruiser. Ralston was smart, kept trophies, but not for pleasure. For control. If anyone ever turned on him, he had proof they were dirty too. "Did he keep them here?" Eli asked. Carnes nodded toward the fairground office at the far end of the lot. He had a safe in the floor. Right under the Ferris wheel generator, Eli grabbed a crowbar from his trunk. Jonas followed, camera slung over his shoulder, every instinct humming. The office was barely standing. Wallpaper peeled in strips, and a nest of old fare tickets littered the floor. Eli found the generator, a rusted hulk, and, beneath it, the faint outline of a metal panel. He pried it open. Inside lay a rusted safe, half filled with rainwater. He reached in, pulled out what remained: a revolver wrapped in a plastic tarp, 2 cassette tapes, October 13th, 1987, Tape 1, and October 14th, 1987, Tape 2. 2, and a single badge, tarnished but still legible. Sheriff Tom Ralston. Jonas swallowed hard. "That's your smoking gun." Eli looked at the badge, then at the gun. "No," he said quietly. "That's his confession." Later that morning, as the rain clouds broke and sunlight spilled across the fairground, Lydia stood beside the patch of turned earth where her sister had lain for 38 years. She held one of the photographs, Rachel at the fair, cotton candy in hand, laughing into the wind, and whispered, "You can rest now." The Ferris wheel groaned in the wind behind her, turning just once, a single creaking revolution, before falling still. The evidence room smelled of rust and mildew, the air still damp from the flood that had nearly swallowed it 2 days ago. Sheriff Eli Grant sat at the steel table with Jonas and Lydia, the recovered cassette tapes resting between them. The handwritten labels, faded but legible, read in a trembling scrawl, October 13th, 1987, Tape 1. October 14th, 1987, Tape 2. 2. Jonas adjusted his camera to record. "You sure you want this on file?" Eli nodded. "If this is what it looks like, the world deserves to hear it." He slipped the first tape into the old player. The click of the play button echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. At first, nothing, just static and the faint hiss of time. Then a voice, gravelly, deliberate, unmistakably Tom Ralston. "Got the girls in the truck now. Clint's drunk, says he can't drive. I told him to keep his damn mouth shut. Reed's outside, nervous as a cat. Says we should take them home. Idiot." Lydia flinched. She knew that voice. It had filled every town parade, every radio alert, every promise of safety. Rachel won't stop crying. Sarah's in shock. Clint says he just wanted to scare them, but it's too late now. I told him we'd handle it my way. A pause. Rain against the windshield, wind howling. Then, the sound of a gun being cocked. They saw too much. And this county don't need another scandal. Not after what happened last year. Jonas leaned forward. "What the hell does he mean, last year?" Eli didn't answer. He hit pause and rewound the last sentence. Played it again. "Not after what happened last year," Lydia whispered. "There was a case. A girl from the trailer park, 17, disappeared in 86. Sheriff said she ran off to Houston." Jonas's pen scratched across the page. So he'd done this before. Eli loaded the second tape. "October 14th, Ralston's voice said, slower now, slurred with exhaustion or whiskey. "Told Clint to dump the car in the creek. Told Reed to bury the girl. Said it was for the good of the town. I'll make it right later. Make it right in the report." Another long silence. Then, almost a whisper, "Sarah's still alive. Said she won't tell. Said she just wants to go home. I can't let her." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God. Took her to the fairground." Clint lost it, started yelling. Had to shut him up, too. "No one will find them. Water covers everything. That's what the preacher says. Water washes sin clean." The tape clicked to an end. No one moved for several seconds. The rain had stopped outside, but it was as if the air itself carried its echo. Jonas whispered. He recorded his own damn crimes. Eli nodded slowly. Guilt has a way of wanting company. Later that afternoon, the sheriff's office filled with a low hum of reporters, investigators, and state police. The tapes had changed everything. Harper County was no longer just a forgotten town with a cold case. It was a headline. Lydia stood apart from the chaos, staring out the window. The storm had washed the town clean, but inside her the dirt only settled deeper. When Eli approached, she didn't turn. "My father worked for Ralston," she said quietly. "Ran maintenance on his patrol cars. I used to think Ralston was a hero. He fooled a lot of people." "Do you think he believed it? That he was protecting the town?" Eli sighed. "I think he believed in himself." "That's worse." She looked at him then, eyes red but steady. "What happens now?" "Now," Eli said, "we tell everyone what really happened. And we see how many others he buried along the way." That night, Jonas sat alone in his motel room, reviewing the footage. Ralston's voice echoed through his headphones, brittle and haunted. He stopped the tape mid-sentence and pressed his palms against his eyes. He'd chased stories his whole career, men who killed for money, power, obsession. But this felt different. This was small-town decay, evil that grew quietly, watered by fear and loyalty. He closed his laptop and glanced at the window. The fairground lights, now part of the police perimeter, blinked faintly in the distance. The Ferris wheel stood silhouetted against the moon, a motionless halo of rust. He whispered into the dark, "What else did you do, Sheriff?" The next morning, Eli met the state forensic team at the fairground again. The ground where Rachel's remains had been found was now cordoned off, but beyond it, under a patch of soft, disturbed soil near the Ferris wheel base, the team had uncovered something new. A small wooden cross, hand-carved, initials etched faintly at the bottom, SM. Eli crouched down, his throat tight. "Sarah Miller." The lead investigator, a woman from Austin, glanced at him. "We'll exhume carefully. But there's something else. A second box, buried deeper. Looks newer." They unearthed it. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, was a stack of photographs. Different from the Polaroids found before. These were surveillance shots, faces, license plates, documents. Jonas leaned in. "These aren't from the 80s. They're from the 90s. The investigator nodded. "Looks like someone kept watching and recording long after Ralston died." Eli felt the blood drain from his face. Then someone else was in on it. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the trees, Lydia walked the edge of the fairground alone. The sheriff's tapes had answered one question: who killed Rachel and Sarah? But opened a darker one: who had been watching ever since? She paused near the Ferris wheel and glanced down. A trail of footprints, fresh, not yet washed away by dew, led toward the tree line. Her breath caught. In the distance, a figure stood half-shrouded by mist, motionless, watching. When she blinked, he was gone. Lydia could still feel the eyes on her long after the mist swallowed the figure. She hurried back toward the floodlights, mud sucking at her shoes, heart pounding against her ribs. She told herself it was only one of the deputies, someone finishing paperwork or checking the perimeter. But she knew it wasn't. At the fairground gate, Sheriff Grant met her halfway. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, steady but breathless from worry. "There was someone in the trees," she said. "Tall. Watching." He swept his flashlight toward the woods. The beam caught only fog and the gleam of wet bark. "No fresh vehicles on the road. Whoever it was, they're gone." "They were here, Eli." He nodded slowly. "Then they'll be back." At dawn, he stood in the office trailer reviewing the photographs recovered from the second box. Jonas had sorted them across the table, his journalist's mind already mapping connections. Polaroids from 1987 on one side, modern 35mm prints on the other. "Different cameras, same style," Jonas said. "Same vantage points, too. Look at this." He pointed to two nearly identical shots of the old diner, one dated August 1987, the other 2003. Whoever took these stood in the same place. Eli frowned. So Ralston wasn't working alone. He had someone keeping tabs after he died, maybe to make sure the story stayed buried. They flipped through more photos. Shots of Lydia opening the diner each morning, of Jonas interviewing townsfolk, even one of Eli at the courthouse steps 2 days ago. Jesus, Jonas whispered. These were taken this week. Eli's stomach turned. So our watcher isn't a ghost. That afternoon, the county's last mechanic, an old man named Walter Price, came forward after seeing the news. He'd worked maintenance under Sheriff Ralston in the late 80s. Eli met him in the garage behind the courthouse. The place smelled of oil and rust. Price wiped his hands on a rag. "You're looking for who kept them tapes, ain't you?" Eli nodded. "You know something? I welded that safe under the Ferris wheel for Ralston myself. He paid me cash, said it was for county receipts, but I knew better. Did anyone else know about it?" Price hesitated. "His son might have. Ben Ralston. Kid was maybe 15 back then. Kept hanging around the station, always borrowing his daddy's camera. Ben Ralston's still around. Lives out past the reservoir. Never did much after the old man died. Keeps to himself. Folks say he's got his daddy's eyes." Evening fell blue and sharp over Harper. The rain had cleared, leaving the roads mirror-slick and empty. Eli drove out toward the reservoir, Jonas riding shotgun with a tape recorder running. "Ben Ralston," Jonas said. "You think he's the one watching?" "I think he grew up learning exactly how to disappear in plain sight." They found the house half hidden by cedar and rusted cars. One porch light burned weakly, casting a cone of yellow on the gravel. Eli knocked once, twice. No answer. He turned the knob. The door creaked open. Inside smelled of dust and film chemicals. On every wall hung photographs, hundreds of them, tacked in rows like evidence boards. Faces, streets, the creek, the fairground, Lydia's diner. At the center of it all, an old television flickered with static, the blue glow painting the room like lightning. Jonas whispered, "This is a shrine." A sound came from the back room, footsteps, deliberate, slow. Eli drew his sidearm. "Ben Ralston, Sheriff's Department, come out where I can see you." A tall man stepped into the doorway. Mid-40s, pale eyes, camera strap hanging from his neck. He raised both hands. "Don't shoot, Sheriff. I've been expecting you back at the station." Lydia sat in the dim hallway, hands clenched in her lap. Through the office window, she could see Eli questioning Ben Ralston under harsh fluorescent light. Jonas recorded from the corner, every word etched in the air. Eli laid one of the recent photos on the table. "You took this." Ben nodded. "I take them all." "Why?" "To remember." "Remember what?" "What my father did. What you people let him do." His voice cracked with a strange mix of grief and fury. "He said he was saving the town. Said those girls were trouble. When he came home that night, he was covered in mud. Told me to forget it. So I didn't. I kept the truth. I watched everyone who looked away. You've been stalking them for decades," Eli said. "Watching," Ben corrected. "So when the water went down, I'd know when the dead came back for him." He leaned forward, eyes glittering. "You think this is over, Sheriff?" "My father wasn't the first. He just took orders." Eli froze. "From who?" Ben smiled faintly. "You'll see." They never left Harperator when the interview ended. Lydia approached Jonas outside. "Did he tell you anything useful?" "Useful," Jonas said. "He just opened a whole new hole in the ground." He showed her one of the photographs Ben had taken, dated just 2 nights earlier. It showed a group of older men gathered in the shadows behind the courthouse, the same faces that filled the county commission for 30 years. In the background, half hidden by a tree, stood Eli Grant himself. "Looks like your sheriff's been watched too," Jonas said. Lydia stared at the photo. The realization settled like cold lead. "Or warned," she said quietly. That night, Eli sat alone in his office, The photo spread on the desk before him. Outside, the cicadas had gone silent. He thought of Ralston's voice on the tapes, the tremor before the shot, the way guilt had survived long past its maker. He looked toward the window. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement across the street, a shadow shifting behind the courthouse oaks. He reached for the light switch, plunged the office into darkness, and waited. In the faint reflection of the glass, a figure stood watching from the lawn, camera glinting like an unblinking eye. When Eli stepped toward the door, the shadow turned and melted into the trees. Morning came thin and pale, the kind of light that bleaches everything honest. Sheriff Eli Grant hadn't slept. The photograph of the courthouse meeting still lay on his desk. He'd stared at it for hours, not just at the faces of the old county men, but at his own blurred silhouette standing among them. He didn't remember being there. When Jonas walked in, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other, he stopped short. "You look like hell." Eli managed a half smile. "Feel worse. Sit down." Jonas set the coffee on the desk. "Ben Ralston's statement checks out. I cross-referenced names on the old county payroll. Every man in that photo was on the commission in 1987. Every one of them worked the fair that year." Eli rubbed his temples. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Ralston wasn't just covering up a murder. He was protecting his friends." Jonas slid a folder across the table. Inside were photocopies of property ledgers, bank transfers, and a faded document stamped in red. Harper Development Committee, 1986. Eli flipped through it. "County contracts. Construction permits, fake ones," Jonas said. "Issued for fairground improvements that never happened. The money went missing, $40,000. The same month the girls disappeared, Eli looked up, face hardening. "You think Sarah and Rachel found out? Or saw something they shouldn't have?" By mid-morning, Lydia arrived at the station. She'd been helping the state team catalog the evidence from the fairground, but her eyes told a different story. Sleepless, haunted. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked. Eli nodded. "Looks like Ralston and his buddies were laundering county money through fake construction projects. My guess, the girls overheard a conversation or stumbled on a ledger." Lydia's voice trembled. "So they killed them to keep it quiet," Jonas added quietly, "and made it look like a runaway case." Ralston was good at that. She stared at the wall of photos. Sarah, Rachel, the fairgrounds, Ralston's badge. How many people knew? Eli hesitated. "Too many. And some of them are still alive." They started making calls. Old council members, fair vendors, county clerks. Most hung up. One pretended not to remember. Another said, "You don't stir ghosts, Sheriff." You let them sleep by noon. They'd compiled a list of names. Harold Nash, Carl Benton, Warren Lee, Tommy Stroud. All former members of the Harper Development Committee. All retired. All still living within 30 miles. Jonas muttered, "That's not coincidence. That's a pact Eli called the Austin DA's office, requesting warrants." The operator transferred him twice before someone finally picked up. "Sheriff Grant? This case is officially under review. You're to hold off until the state team arrives. Understood?" He stared at the phone. "Understood." When he hung up, he looked at Jonas. "They're freezing us out." "Why?" "Because the circle doesn't end in Harper," Eli said. "It reaches Austin." That night, Lydia walked home through the rain-slick streets, her nerves humming with unease. The diner's windows glowed faintly across the square, familiar, safe. Yet as she reached for her keys, something caught her eye. A white envelope lay tucked under the windshield wiper of her truck. Inside was a single photograph, a recent one. Her, Jonas, and Eli standing together outside the sheriff's office that morning. Scrawled on the back in shaky pen, "He's one of us." She froze. At the same time, across town, Eli sat in his kitchen nursing black coffee and exhaustion. The knock on his door came slow and deliberate. When he opened it, 3 men stood on the porch, older, clean-shaven, dressed like bankers or deacons. Faces he recognized from the courthouse photo. "Evening, Sheriff," the tallest said. "Mind if we come in?" Eli stepped aside, every instinct screaming. They entered quietly, hats in hand, movements practiced. "We appreciate what you've done for this town," the tall man began. "Keeping the peace, keeping our name out of the papers. But it's time to stop digging. You've found enough bones for one lifetime." Eli's jaw tightened. "Those girls deserve the truth." "They got it," the man said softly. Ralston acted alone. "Let it rest." He laid a sealed envelope on the table. "There's a promotion waiting for you in Austin if you close the case. Call it gratitude. Eli didn't touch it, and if I don't," the man's smile never reached his eyes, "then you'll end up like the last sheriff who went looking for ghosts." They left without another word. The sound of their car fading down the road was louder than thunder. Eli stared at the envelope. Inside, he could feel the weight of a check or a threat. Maybe both. He lit a match, dropped it onto the envelope, and watched it burn. Jonas called minutes later. "Lydia just found a note. Says he's one of us. She's scared, Eli." Eli's voice hardened. "Tell her to lock the doors. And keep the lights on. You think they'll come after her? I think they already have." Around midnight, the rain stopped. The town lay quiet, blanketed by mist. In the diner, Lydia sat alone with the lights blazing. Every creak of the building sounded like footsteps. Through the window, she saw the faint reflection of the Ferris wheel beyond the trees, its rusted frame catching the moonlight. Then, in that reflection, another movement, a figure stepping onto the porch. She turned toward the door just as the bell jingled. "Sheriff?" she started, but froze. It wasn't Eli. The man smiled, eyes cold as marble. "Evening, Miss Pike. I'd like to talk about your sister." The man who entered Lydia's diner didn't belong to the present. He carried the stillness of old photographs. Crisp shirt under a weathered coat, hair slicked back like a preacher's, his smile thin and rehearsed. The kind of man Harper County had always trusted without question. He closed the door gently behind him. Rainwater dripped from his boots, darkening the tile. "You're Lydia Pike," he said. His voice was soft, measured, almost kind. "You look just like your sister." Lydia's throat tightened. "Who are you?" He ignored the question, stepping closer. Rachel had spirit. She wanted to tell the truth. She didn't understand that truth can kill a town faster than any gun. Lydia reached for the counter, steadying herself. "You were one of them." He smiled faintly. "One of us, yes. But we didn't mean for it to go that far. Tom, he lost control. Thought he was saving us all. You murdered them." He shook his head slowly. "No, Miss Pike. I kept the peace. That's what men like me have done here for 100 years. Her hand brushed the edge of the phone behind the register. He noticed. "Don't," he said quietly. "You call the sheriff, and this town burns." You don't want that. Lydia stared at him. Maybe it should. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe admiration. Then his expression hardened. "You sound just like Rachel." Across town, Sheriff Eli Grant's phone rang once, twice, then cut off. A chill ran through him. He was already halfway to the cruiser when Jonas appeared in the doorway. "Where are you going?" "Diner," Eli said, grabbing his jacket. "She's not answering." Jonas grabbed his camera and followed. "If this is what I think it is, we need proof." In the diner, the stranger sat at the counter now, speaking softly while Lydia stood rigid behind it. "Do you know what happens when you dig too deep?" he asked. "The ground collapses. People get buried that don't deserve to." Lydia met his gaze. "You mean you?" He chuckled. "Oh, I've already been buried, Miss Pike. You just don't know it yet." Headlights swept across the windows. Eli's cruiser. The man turned, his smile fading. "Well," he said, "seems our time's up." He slipped something from his coat pocket, a small flash drive sealed in a plastic sleeve, and set it on the counter. "For the sheriff. Tell him the Circle's not a town, it's a trade." Everyone sells something. Before she could react, he stepped back, pushed open the door, and vanished into the mist. By the time Eli burst in, gun drawn, Lydia was trembling, clutching the counter for balance. "He was here," she said. "Said he was part of it." Left this, she handed him the drive. Jonas arrived seconds later, breathless. "Did you see him?" Eli shook his head. "No car, no tracks. Like he walked straight out of a grave." At the station, the flash drive revealed a single file, a video clip, time-stamped April 3rd, 2009. Eli played it on the office computer. A grainy image appeared, a basement room lit by a single bulb. In the center sat Ben Ralston, younger, thinner, eyes wide with fear. Across from him stood the same stranger from the diner, older now, speaking into the camera. "This is proof," the man said. "If anything happens to me, you'll know who ran the Circle. Harper's sins go beyond the creek. They run through the courthouse, through the church, through the bloodline. It doesn't end with Tom." He leaned close to the lens. "It ends with his son." The video cut to black. Jonas whispered, "Ben." Eli sat back slowly. "No, this doesn't make sense." "Ben exposed them, or he pretended to," Jonas said. "Maybe the son picked up where the father left off." Lydia shook her head. "No, he was a child when it happened." "Children grow up watching what power looks like," Jonas replied. The next morning, the state investigators arrived. The DA from Austin, the same voice who'd told Eli to stand down, walked into the sheriff's office with a briefcase and a polite smile. "Sheriff Grant," he said smoothly, "we appreciate your work here." "We'll take it from here." Eli crossed his arms. "That video shows a conspiracy still operating in this county. You expect me to hand that over?" "That's exactly what you'll do," the DA said. "Evidence chain protocol." Jonas muttered, "That's not a request." Eli studied the man's eyes. "You're part of it, aren't you?" The DA's smile didn't falter. "Careful, Sheriff. Paranoia can ruin a career." He reached for the flash drive. Eli let him take it, but not before slipping a duplicate copy from his desk drawer into his pocket. That night, the rain returned. Lydia couldn't sleep. Every time thunder rolled, she saw her sister's face, Rachel laughing under the Ferris wheel lights, a ghost of the last summer they'd shared. She rose, wrapped a coat around her shoulders, and walked outside. The town was silent except for the soft hiss of rain. She crossed the square, drawn toward the faint glow of the fairground lights. From across the field, she saw someone standing by the Ferris wheel, still as a statue. She stopped. "Rachel?" she whispered, half a prayer, half a plea. The figure tilted its head, and lightning flashed, revealing not her sister, but Ben Ralston, his eyes gleaming with something feral and broken. "Shouldn't have kept digging," he said softly. The rain thickened into a silver curtain, muting the world to breath and thunder. Lydia stood frozen by the fairground gate, water sliding down her face. Ben Ralston watched her through the downpour, motionless except for the twitch of his jaw. The Ferris wheel loomed behind him like a rusted halo, each bolt glinting when lightning cracked the sky. "Ben," she called. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "You don't have to do this." He stepped closer. "Don't I?" His hair was plastered to his forehead, eyes bright with a feverish light. "My father built this town on lies, Miss Pike. You think anyone else can live with that truth? They all helped him. The church, the deputies, even the school board. They paid to keep the blood quiet." Lydia's heart pounded. You could have told someone. You could have stopped it. I tried. He laughed once, high, sharp, brittle. When I showed them the tapes, they told me I was sick, said I was hearing ghosts. He lifted something from his coat pocket, a pistol, old and blued, the kind the county issued in the 80s. The lightning flashed again, and Lydia saw the initials carved into the grip. T.R. Tom Ralston. You kept his gun, she whispered. I kept everything, Ben said, because no one else would remember. Eli and Jonas reached the fairground minutes later, their headlights cutting through the storm. The radio had gone dead miles back. The wind howled through the open window as they skidded to a stop on the mud. They saw her first. Lydia, standing in the floodlight's edge, hands raised. And Ben, the gun steady at his side. Eli stepped out slowly, palms open. Ben, put it down. Ben turned, rain streaking his face like tears. You found the tapes. You heard him. You know what he did. I do. Eli said. And that's why this has to end right here. You're not your father. Ben shook his head. No, I'm worse. I believed him when he said Harper needed protecting. I thought maybe the town deserved saving, but all it ever wanted was silence. He gestured toward the Ferris wheel. You see that? That's the heart of it. That's where they met, where they made their deals, where they buried my mother's faith in this place. You think you can clean that with one arrest? Jonas edged closer, camera hidden under his jacket, recording every word. Ben, he said carefully, if you want the truth to live, you've got to leave us alive to tell it. For a moment, something flickered in Ben's expression. A flash of the frightened boy he'd once been. Then thunder rolled again, and his face hardened. She was there too, he said quietly. The night the girls died. My mother. She saw Ralston drive off with them. She told me years later, when the whiskey finally broke her silence. Said she thought he'd taken them home. His voice dropped to a whisper. When she found the blood on his boots, she tried to leave. He made sure she never did. Lydia's knees weakened. He killed her? Ben nodded. Buried her in the woods behind the house. Said she'd run away. Eli stepped closer. Then you know what happens when men like that keep the badge. Don't become him. Ben looked down at the gun. It's the only thing of his I ever kept. He raised it slowly toward his own chest. If I end it, the circle dies with me. Eli lunged. The gun fired, one deafening crack that shattered the night. For a second, no one moved. Then Ben crumpled, the weapon slipping from his hand, smoke curling into the rain. Eli knelt beside him, pressing a hand to the wound. Stay with me, Ben. Stay with me. Ben's eyes fluttered. He wasn't alone, he whispered. Look, under the church. His hand went limp. The rain washed a thin ribbon of blood across the mud, carrying it toward the creek that had started everything. At sunrise, paramedics took the body away. Lydia sat wrapped in a blanket on the back bumper of an ambulance, silent. Jonas crouched beside her. He said, under the church. You think he meant records? Bodies? She stared toward the horizon, where the first light touched the rusted Ferris wheel. Maybe both. Eli joined them, face drawn, eyes rimmed red. I called a team. We'll start digging as soon as the ground dries. Whatever's under there, we finish this. Lydia looked at him. And when we do? Eli took a slow breath. Then Harper finally gets to choose what it wants to be, quiet or honest. That evening the rain finally stopped. The fairground sat empty again, puddles reflecting a bruised sky. Jonas packed his camera gear into the trunk, hesitating before closing it. You going to give this footage to the state? Eli shook his head. Not yet. Truth has a way of dying in paperwork. He looked toward the creek. The water had risen, calm now, as if nothing had ever stirred its depths. We'll find what's under that church, he said. And then we tell it all. By dawn, Harper County was slick with fog and ash-colored light. The rain had stopped, but the earth still steamed from the storm. The church stood on the hill at the edge of town, St. Matthew's, white-clapboard walls leaning under the weight of decades. Lydia, Jonas, and Sheriff Eli Grant watched from the road as a small excavation team assembled near the foundation. Yellow tape fluttered in the damp breeze. Eli's voice was low. Ben said, "Under the church. If he was right, we'll know soon." Lydia clutched her coat tighter. He was right about everything else. Jonas lifted his camera. "You sure you want this on record?" Eli nodded. "If we're digging up ghosts, we're not burying them again." The first shovels broke ground at 8:10 a.m. The soil was heavy and dark, soaked through. A few minutes in, one worker's spade hit something hollow. Wood, then concrete. Eli crouched beside the hole. "Careful. Widen it." They scraped away the mud until a trap door emerged. Old, reinforced with rusted hinges. A chain had once been looped through the handle and padlocked, but the metal was corroded, brittle as bone. One of the deputies pried it open. The smell hit them first, damp earth and rot, sealed for decades. Jonas gagged softly behind his camera. Lydia whispered, "Oh my God." A narrow stairway descended into the darkness below the church. The air that rose out of it was cold, still, untouched by time. Eli flicked on his flashlight. The beam sliced through the dust. "Stay behind me." The steps creaked under their weight. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a low brick chamber lit only by their flashlights. The floor was packed earth. Wooden crosses leaned against the walls, dozens of them, each carved with initials. Lydia knelt to trace one, R.P. Rachel Pike, next to it, S.M. Sarah Miller. Jonas panned the camera slowly. There must be 20, maybe more. Eli moved to the far wall. In the beam of his light, a table appeared. Steel legs, stained surface. A collection of ledgers sat stacked neatly beside it, bound in twine. He flipped one open. Handwritten entries in neat cursive filled the pages. Donation, Harper Development Committee expenditure, discretionary maintenance, St. Matthew's witness, TRWL-CB. Eli's voice shook. "These are payoffs." Every payment for silence, Lydia's breath came shallow. So the church was the Circle's vault. This is where they kept their records. And they're dead. From the corner of the chamber came a faint sound, metal shifting like a chain dragged across stone. Eli raised his light. A second door, half hidden behind an old baptismal font, stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, another small room. Inside were boxes, dozens of VHS tapes, their labels faded but legible under dust. 1987 Fairgrounds, Ralston, Nash. Street, Trial Prep, 1988, Private. Jonas whispered, "Every meeting, every confession." They filmed it, Eli nodded grimly. "Ben's proof." This is what his father used to control them. He turned toward the stairs. "Bag everything. We take it all to Austin." Lydia lingered by the crosses, her hand brushing the one marked RP. She whispered, "You can rest now, Rachel." By mid-afternoon, the site buzzed with officers and media trucks. Word had spread. The town that had whispered for 38 years now stood in stunned silence on the hill, watching the past come out of the ground. Jonas filmed everything, his lens trembling slightly. "You ever seen anything like this?" he asked a deputy. The deputy shook his head. "Not in this lifetime." At sunset, Eli stood at the edge of the excavation pit, staring down into the dark mouth of the cellar. The DA from Austin arrived in a black sedan, flanked by suits. He looked pale, drawn, not so smooth now. "You dug too deep, Sheriff," he said quietly. "You've opened something that won't close." Eli faced him. "Good. Maybe it's time everyone saw what's been rotting under their feet." The DA hesitated, then sighed. "You'll have protection." There are names in those ledgers that reach higher than this county. You'll be getting calls from Washington." Eli didn't answer. He just turned and walked back toward the church. Night fell. The news crews packed up, leaving the town hushed and raw. Lydia stood alone near the porch steps of the church. The smell of soil and rain hung heavy in the air. Eli joined her, hands in his pockets. "She would have liked this," Lydia said softly. "Rachel. The truth out in the open." He nodded. "It doesn't bring her back, but it stops the lies." Jonas approached, holding his camera. "Everything's backed up. The footage, the files, the ledgers. Nothing disappears this time." "Good," Eli said. The three of them stood in silence, listening to the wind move through the pines. For the first time, Harper County sounded like an honest place. Not peaceful, but unburdened. 2 months later, Harper County looked different under the same Texas sun. The courthouse lawn, once the stage for whispers and denials, now bore a bronze plaque inscribed with the names of every known victim found beneath St. Matthew's Church. Fresh flowers were always there, sometimes left by strangers, sometimes by Lydia Pike, who still visited every Sunday morning before opening the diner. The news vans had long gone. So had the men in suits. But the echoes of what they unearthed lingered like humidity in the air. Heavy, invisible, everywhere. Eli Grant was still sheriff, though he'd turned down the promotion to Austin. The governor's office had called it commendable restraint. He called it unfinished business. He spent most of his days combing through archives, identifying the initials carved into those crude wooden crosses. 37 in total. Not just Sarah and Rachel. Women, drifters, men who disappeared from the county between 1971 and 1989. Lives quietly erased while the circle preyed above them. Eli's deputy found him one morning sitting in the church basement, staring at the empty space where the crosses had been removed. "You still looking for ghosts?" the deputy asked gently. Eli smiled faintly. "Just listening to make sure they're gone." Jonas Kells sold his footage to a national network 6 weeks later. The documentary aired under the title, The Circle Beneath Harper County. It opened with his voiceover and closed with a line that made even Eli's throat tighten. "The past doesn't rest until someone stands still long enough to hear it breathing." The film won awards, but Jonas didn't care much for interviews. He moved out to a small ranch near Llano, said he liked the quiet. When people asked if he ever feared for his life after exposing the circle, he would simply say, "Fear's what keeps the truth from rotting." Lydia Pike reopened the diner. She changed its name from Marcy's Place to Rachel's Table. Locals came from counties away, ordering pie and coffee just to sit in silence near the woman who had brought her sister's story home. Sometimes, when the lunch rush quieted and the ceiling fan hummed its slow rhythm, Lydia would look toward the window and imagine Rachel sitting in her old booth, sunlight spilling across her freckles, her laugh caught in the air. She never spoke of the night at the fairgrounds again, but each year, on the anniversary of her sister's disappearance, she left a single blue ribbon tied to the Ferris wheel's lowest beam. One cool autumn morning, Eli stopped by the diner. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Lydia poured him a cup and asked, "You ever sleep?" He chuckled softly. "Sometimes." "You?" She shook her head. "Not when it rains." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that comes after long wars. Outside, kids played in the square, their laughter echoing off the storefronts that had once hidden secrets. "I keep thinking," Lydia said finally, "what if Rachel and Sarah hadn't been curious that night? What if they'd just gone home?" Eli looked at her. "Then someone else would have disappeared. Maybe both of us would still be living in a lie." Lydia nodded. "I guess truth always finds a way." He smiled. "Eventually." That evening, Eli drove out of town and stopped near the fairground. The Ferris wheel was a skeleton now, dismantled and fenced off. He stood where the creek curved past the field, the same creek where everything had begun. The water was calm, reflecting the bruised colors of sunset. He knelt and tossed a pebble in. Ripples spread wide, then disappeared. For a moment he thought he heard voices in the wind, laughter, faint and familiar. Maybe memory, maybe something deeper. Either way, it felt like forgiveness. He whispered into the quiet, "Rest. Now." Then he turned, the sky darkening behind him, and walked back toward the lights of a town learning, finally, how to live in the open.